71. The Donkey's Revenge. Jun Qingyu was a scholar of some reputation who lived in Manchuria. When he went up for his master's degree, he heard that there was a Taoist priest at the capital who would tell people's fortunes and was very anxious to see him. And at the conclusion of the second part of the examination, he accidentally met him at Pao de Xuan. The priest was over 60 years of age and had the usual white beard flowing down over his breast. Around him stood a perfect wall of people inquiring their future fortunes, and to each the old man made a brief reply. But when he saw Jun among the crowd, he was overjoyed, and seizing him by the hand said, "Sir, your virtuous intentions command my esteem." He then led him up behind a screen and asked if he did not wish to know what was to come. And when Jun replied in the affirmative, the priest informed him that his prospects were bad. "You may succeed in passing this examination," continued he, "but on returning covered with honor to your home, I fear that your mother will be no longer there." Now Jun was a very filial son, and as soon as he heard these words, his tears began to flow, and he declared that he would go back without competing any further. The priest observed that if he let this chance slip, he could never hope for success, to which Jun replied that, on the other hand, if his mother were to die, he could never hope to have her back again, and that even the rank of viceroy would not repay him for her loss. "Well," said the priest, "you and I were connected in a former existence, and I must do my best to help you now." So he took out a pill which he gave to Jun, and told him that if he sent it post-haste by someone to his mother, it would prolong her life for 7 days, and thus he would be able to see her once again after the examination was over. Jun took the pill and went off in very low spirits. But he soon reflected that the span of human life is a matter of destiny, and that every day he could spend at home would be one more day devoted to the service of his mother. Accordingly, he got ready to start at once, and hiring a donkey, actually set out on his way back. When he had gone about half a mile, the donkey turned round and ran home. And when he used his whip, the animal threw itself down on the ground. Jun got into a great perspiration, and his servant recommended him to remain where he was. But this he would not hear of, and hired another donkey, which served him exactly the same trick as the other one. The sun was now sinking behind the hills, and his servant advised his master to stay and finish his examination while he himself went back home before him. Jun had no alternative but to assent, and the next day he hurried through with his papers, starting immediately afterwards, and not stopping at all on the way either to eat or to sleep. All night long he went on, and arrived to find his mother in a very critical state. However, when he gave her the pill, she so far recovered that he was able to go in and see her. Grasping his hand, she begged him not to weep, telling him that she had just dreamt she had been down to the infernal regions, where the king of hell had informed her with a gracious smile that her record was fairly clean, and that in view of the filial piety of her son, she was to have 12 years more of life. Jun was rejoiced at this, and his mother was soon restored to her former health. Before long the news arrived that Jun had passed his examination, upon which he bade adieu to his mother, and went off to the capital, where he bribed the eunuchs of the palace to communicate with his friend, the Taoist priest. The latter was very much pleased, and came out to see him, whereupon Jun prostrated himself at his feet. "Ah," said the priest, "this success of yours, and the prolongation of your good mother's life, is all a reward for your virtuous conduct. What have I done in the matter?" Jun was very much astonished that the priest should already know what had happened. However, he now inquired as to his own future. "You will never rise to high rank," replied the priest, "but you will attain the years of an octogenarian. In a former state of existence, you and I were once traveling together when you threw a stone at a dog and accidentally killed a frog. Now that frog has reappeared in life as a donkey, and according to all principles of destiny, you ought to suffer for what you did. But your filial piety has touched the gods. A protecting star influence has passed into your nativity sheet, and you will come to no harm. On the other hand, there is your wife. In her former state, she was not as virtuous as she might have been, and her punishment in this life was to be widowed quite young. You, however, have secured the prolongation of your own term of years, and therefore I fear that before long your wife will pay the penalty of death." June was much grieved at hearing this, but after a while he asked the priest where his second wife-to-be was living. "At Jungshu," replied the latter. "She is now 14 years old." The priest then bade him adieu, telling him that if any mischance should befall him, he was to hurry off towards the southeast. About a year after this, June's wife did die, and his mother then desiring him to go and visit his uncle, who was a magistrate in Kiangsi, on which journey he would have to pass through Jungshu, it seemed like a fulfillment of the old priest's prophecy. As he went along, he came to a village on the banks of a river where a large crowd of people was gathered together, round a theatrical performance which was going on there. June would have passed quietly by, and not a stray donkey followed so close behind him that he turned round and hit it over the ears. This startled the donkey so much that it ran off full gallop and knocked a rich gentleman's child, who was sitting with its nurse on the bank, right into the water before any one of the servants could lend a hand to save it. Immediately there was a great outcry against June, who gave his mule the rein and dashed away, mindful of the priest's warning, towards the southeast. After riding about 7 miles, he reached a mountain village where he saw an old man standing at the door of a house, and jumping off his mule, made him a low bow. The old man asked him in and inquired his name and whence he came, to which June replied by telling him the whole adventure. "Never fear," said the old man. "You can stay here while I send out to learn the position of affairs." By the evening his messenger had returned, and then they knew for the first time the child belonged to a wealthy family. The old man looked grave and said, "Had it been anybody else's child, I might have helped you. As it is, I can do nothing." June was greatly alarmed at this. However, the old man told him to remain quietly there for the night and see what turn matters might take. June was overwhelmed with anxiety and did not sleep a wink. And next morning he heard that the constables were after him, and that it was death to anyone who should conceal him. The old man changed countenance at this and went inside, leaving June to his own reflections. But towards the middle of the night he came and knocked at June's door, and sitting down, began to ask how old his wife was. June replied that he was a widower, at which the old man seemed rather pleased, and declared that in such case, help would be forthcoming. "For," said he, "my sister's husband has taken the vows and become a priest, and my sister herself has died, leaving an orphan girl who has now no home. And if you would only marry her ... June was delighted, more especially as this would be both the fulfillment of the Taoist priest's prophecy and a means of extricating himself from his present difficulty. At the same time, he declared he should be sorry to implicate his future father-in-law. "Never fear about that," replied the old man. "My sister's husband is pretty skillful in the black art. He has not mixed much with the world of late. But when you are married, you can discuss the matter with my niece." So June married the young lady, who was 16 years of age and very beautiful. But whenever he looked at her, he took occasion to sigh. At last she said, "I may be ugly, but you needn't be in such a hurry to let me know it." Whereupon June begged her pardon and said he felt himself only too lucky to have met with such a divine creature, adding that he sighed because he feared some misfortune was coming on them which would separate them forever. He then told her his story, And the young lady was very angry that she should have been drawn into such a difficulty without a word of warning. June fell on his knees and said he had already consulted with her uncle, who was unable himself to do anything, much as he wished it. He continued that he was aware of her power, and then, pointing out that his alliance was not altogether beneath her, made all kinds of promises if she would only help him out of this trouble. The young lady was no longer able to refuse, but informed him that to apply to her father would entail certain disagreeable consequences, as he had retired from the world and did not anymore recognize her as his daughter. That night they did not attempt to sleep, spending the interval in patting their knees with thick felt concealed beneath their clothes. And then they got into chairs and were carried off to the hills. After journeying some distance, they were compelled by the nature of the road to alight and walk. And it was only by a great effort that Jung succeeded at last in getting his wife to the top. At the door of the temple, they sat down to rest, the powder and paint on the young lady's face having all mixed with the perspiration trickling down. But when June began to apologize for bringing her to this pass, she replied that it was a mere trifle compared with what was to come. By and by, they went inside, and threading their way to the wall beyond, found the young lady's father sitting in contemplation, his eyes closed, and a servant boy standing by with a chowry. Everything was beautifully clean and nice, but before the dais were sharp stones scattered about as thick as the stars in the sky. The young lady did not venture to select a favorable spot. She fell on her knees at once, and June did likewise behind her. Then her father opened his eyes, shutting them again almost instantaneously, whereupon the young lady said, "For a long time I have not paid my respects to you. I am now married, and I have brought my husband to see you." A long time passed away, and then her father opened his eyes and said, "You're giving a great deal of trouble," immediately relapsing into silence again. There the husband and wife remained until the stones seemed to pierce into their very bones. But after a while the father cried out, "Have you brought the donkey?" His daughter replied that they had not, whereupon they were told to go and fetch it at once, which they did, not knowing what the meaning of this order was. After a few more days kneeling, they suddenly heard that the murderer of the child had been caught and beheaded, and were just congratulating each other on the success of their scheme, when a servant came in with a stick in his hand, the top of which had been chopped off. "This stick," said the servant, "died instead of you. Bury it reverently, that the wrong done to the tree may be somewhat atoned for." Then June saw that at the place where the top of the stick had been chopped off, there were traces of blood. He therefore buried it with the usual ceremony and immediately set off with his wife and returned to his own home.
Thanks for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more excellent content.